Hi, really happy to be here with Tanja Kuljic. She's co-founder and chief risk officer at PAYLA. How are you today?
Thanks for having me, Melisante. I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So first, for those that might not know PAYLA yet, PAYLA offers a buy now, pay later solution as a service for PSPs and financial institutions. Basically, it's a white label solution. And today we will discuss buy now, pay later and responsible lending. As buy now, pay later is growing in popularity and the number of buy now, pay later solution providers has exploded over the last 2 years, we think that in these challenges economic time, it's even more important to discuss what responsible lending really means. Before we start our conversation, can you tell us a bit more about yourself, Tanja?
Sure. So after finishing the law studies in Belgrade, I joined a company that works in online gaming and gambling space. Firstly, being responsible for the contracts of the third-party providers, all the payment providers they have been using. But back then, which is around 15 years ago, I got very interested as well into the chargebacks back then and as well fraud prevention and such. As I said, as it was years and years ago, the knowledge in the space wasn't that big, so to say. So it was a motivation more for me to get to know, to get in front of the fraudsters, to get to understand how it works. Especially in gambling space, there is a lot of obviously fraud prevention needed. I spent there a bit over 5 years, after which I decided actually to join Paysafe. Paysafe was back then a provider for the merchants I had been working for the companies I had been working for. And I was always interested into understanding a second side, so being responsible for the payment providers on one side just doesn't give you enough knowledge on how they actually do stuff. And I think Paysafe was a great place to go because obviously they have a huge knowledge in the space and their risk team is really amazing. So when joining Paysafe, I took over the responsibility for the risk management and buy now, pay later part of the business. Where I really learned, I have to say, I learned a lot. I spent amazing 6 years. So the group was, risk group especially, was very well connected because we have the same goal, right? We all wanted to fight fraud. We all wanted to understand better the risks and to prevent losses. So after Paylution, part of the Paysafe group was acquired by another company, I actually decided together with a few of the colleagues in the industry to start from the scratch, to pursue the dream to build new buy now, pay later product, which is what we are doing now, or what we did already in PAYLA.
Yeah, that's really super interesting. And it's also great, as you mentioned, that you've basically worked at both sides of the equation, at the merchant side, at a high-risk merchant, but also at the solution provider side with Paysafe. And you're now building your own company with a group of really seasoned people in this industry. So I was wondering, what is the impact of the economic downturn on buy now, pay later?
Well, I think in general, it's obvious that the people are going to spend less, right? So the need for the new goods and services is going to decrease, no question about it. But the impact on the buy now, pay later, the need is going to increase. Why? People use buy now, pay later for two main reasons, right? So we have the need and the possibility to defer the payment.
Yeah.
Especially in the time of economic crisis. We all know when we purchase something, we wait for the refund. The money is taken from our account if we use most of the other payment methods, right? And then there is a long processing time of the refunds, waiting for the money to be back on your account. Whereby with buy now, pay later, it's just convenience. We order the stuff, we pay just for the stuff that we decide to keep. That is one of the things, like deferring the payment until the moment when you actually decide what you want to keep and what you actually want to pay. And then the other thing is our installments, right? Splitting the payment is very convenient in these times. Like managing your finance by splitting the payments with or without interest. Just important thing is, of course, that we are very transparent about it as a providers, helps people manage their finance, helps divide what is now necessary, what I can split into a few payments. But as we all are talking about responsible lending, reason more for us to make sure that we do responsible lending. Although, of course, we don't fall into the category that is now required to be part of the legislation. I think I have to say, in the moment like this, during the crisis, it's as well moral obligation for us payment providers to make sure that we really provide, let's say, short-term loans or invoices in installment as a method of payment only to those that can actually afford it.
Yeah, you make a very good point there. I think this recession will really test the risk management and also the integrity of buy now, pay later providers. You talked about responsible lending. How do you define that within PAYLA, and how do you actually do that? How do you make sure that you don't put consumers in debt and that you really take the right decisions?
Well, it's very important to know your customer, right? Mm-hmm. It's very important. It's also, I was mentioning that before in another conversation. I think responsible lending is more than just, okay, we are not going to put people in debt. Of course, we are not going to put people in debt. That's not in our interest. That's not the interest of our customers. I think we have to make sure that we approve and allow the transactions to those that need it at the moment. What does it mean? It means that we need to understand on one side the customer, what can he afford? Of course, creditworthiness has to be checked every time, but not just that. We can't limit ourselves to, okay, we checked the credit of Melisande, we approve. We have to limit the amount of transactions that we are allowing Melisande to buy with the different merchants using our payment system. Then we have to make sure the amount that we were putting Melisande in debt, so to say. So we have to make sure that we know our customers. We have to make sure that we track as well overall portfolio and adapt it regularly. What does it mean? Unfortunately, a lot of systems still work in a way. There is one solution that fits all. There is never one solution that fits all, definitely. I think we need to track the behavior of our customers. We need to track the aging of the claims. We need to understand if something was a good score before and person could potentially afford something, that is changing. That has to be tracked on a, I always say, daily basis, literally daily basis. We have to check what is going on with our portfolio. How does it look like? And what do we have to do? How can we adapt our system to make sure that we do responsible lending?
And that's for you an activity that your team is monitoring daily.
I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of data. I'm a huge fan of analysis. I never rely on okay, it's going to work just because it worked before. I always say, like, the world is changing, we are changing, everything is changing. So on daily basis, I think we should monitor our portfolio. We should search for the key risk indicators in different fields, right? So in buy now, pay later, we have to divide fraud risk and credit risk, but then still kind of connect them together and understand the big picture of what's going on. And when we see, for example, there is an increase default on the payments coming from the certain group of clients, we definitely need to adapt our risk settings and make sure that we track and monitor it regularly.
Yeah, I guess you use all kinds of credit bureaus and systems and your own proprietary information. But how does open banking or open finance can help you in doing this? Is it something that you're considering as well, or is that more like a second loop? How does it work for you?
That is definitely second loop. Why? I think that as well, people use buy now, pay later for the reason, and sometimes without the reason. It all depends, of course, on the provider, if we can rely on them or not. But people are very concerned about the data privacy. They're not willing to share too many information. So the product itself is convenient as well for the end consumers, because all they need to do is just to fill a basic information we need from them in order to be allowed to use the system. So the second chance loop is, for me, the way to use account information. So in the case where we are unsure about the customer, in the case where we can't fully identify the customer, and we are unaware of the finance side of the customer, financial side of the customer, in that case, we could be using access to account and calculating certain scores on our own and accepting or declining the transaction at the end of the day.
Yeah. Makes sense. Hey, and Tanja, as we discussed earlier, you expect, okay, e-commerce will go down, but the use of buy now, pay later, there will be more demand for this kind of payment.
Definitely.
For the obvious reasons. And I guess with the increase of use, there will also be an increase of fraud cases. It can be account takeover, it can be abuse. How do you sort of detect and prevent that with your team? What is your secret sauce?
Well, I can't give you all. No, joke aside. So, well, I have to say there is not one like bulletproof fraud prevention system that we can have in place. Definitely not. I think it's very difficult. Well, there could be, but then we wouldn't allow any transaction, right? We can block all the transactions, see it as a fraud, and then, it's not going to work for either for us, merchants, or the customers. I think we need to follow like more layers approach. On one side, there has to be obviously automated decisioning based on what? Based on the information we have on the customer. If it's a known customer, if it's a new customer, like what do we have in our own database on the customer? Then we need to as well check all the information that we receive from the checkout page. The more, the better. The more information we receive from the merchants, for example, on the purchase, on the basket content, on certain other parameters we can use for the automated decisioning, the better it is, because then we have a better picture on who is behind this name of Melisante. Is it really Melisante? What is the customer behavior in this case? And the third part of it is as well, of course, the third-party providers, for the different device fingerprinting, for the information about the email, information, geolocation, IP, as well, phone, and all the other things that we can get from the external providers. All of that connects to this automated decisioning, where you have huge number of rules we have to have in place, and that covers a big part. That has to cover really a big part of prevention and detection. But for me, a very important part is the second layer, right? So the monitoring of the transactions, both the transactions that we allowed and the transactions that we declined. We need to understand. We need to search for anomalies. We need to search for certain patterns. We need to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. It's always it is something that is driving me all these years, because it's always super interesting it's always changing. There is absolutely people used to say, like, Tanja, you see fraud everywhere. I do. That's great. I do. It comes with my nature. I don't know. I love it. I love doing fraud prevention. I think it's one of the most exciting things to do. And then, as I said, like, we need to. It's all about understanding the data that we have. We need to understand our customer base. We need to be able to see, okay, there is a change. Why is there a change? Why is there a change, for example, in an average amount we see with a merchant XYZ? Yeah. Where does it come from? When does it come from? Is it a night? Is it a night payment? Is it a night shopping? Is it like all the little triggers that could say to us, like, oof, or there is a strange, I don't know, domain, whatever it is. Yeah. It's always like finding the small differences, and then digging deeper and understanding, is this a legal business that I want to proceed with and I want to process, or is it something that should concern me? And there is a certain amount we can do by ourselves. There is a certain big part of machine learning models that can help us create analysis, that can show us exactly where to look at. Because if you imagine like hundreds of thousands of transactions, you look in one Excel file, it's impossible. But then, it's the reports behind it, it's the monitoring. We do a lot of, we have kind of two different sides. I prefer like having real-time monitoring for the certain risk alerts to understand, okay, we need to act now. But as well, every morning when we come to the office, drink a coffee, we need to check all the transactions from the day before and understand what went through and where do we see a potential risk.
Well, thank you so much, Tanja, for sharing all your insights into responsible lending, but also how you keep this space safe. And if I would be a fraud specialist, I would love to join your team. I mean, you're so excited about this space. No, really, that's really inspirational. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Melisante. It was a pleasure talking to you.